Fat Controller's engines are proud of how useful they are. It makes them feel important. But none of them feels more important than Gordon. Watch out, Gordon wished. You'll get my paint all sooty. Pulling trucks is a sooty job, teased Salty, but then you wouldn't know. Of course not, Gordon huffed importantly. Express engines don't pull trucks. It wouldn't be dignified. Dinghy-fried, puzzled Percy. What's that? Dignified, Gordon corrected. It means someone's too big for his buffers, teased Salty. Pah, said Gordon, and he puffed away. That evening, fog covered the island of Sodor. Everything slowed down, and soon the docks were packed with waiting trucks. This caused confusion and delay. The Fat Controller came to the sheds. He was in a great hurry. "Henry, Thomas and Percy," he said, "you must go to the docks immediately." "Yes, sir," they whistled. Then the Fat Controller turned to the big blue engine. "You too, Gordon," he said. "I need a big engine to take the trucks where they won't be in the way." "Trucks!" huffed Gordon. He could not believe what he had heard. Gordon wasn't happy to be pulling trucks. He waited impatiently while they were shunted into place. Hurry up, chuffed Gordon crossly. "Why the rush, Gordon?" asked Thomas. "If I must pull trucks, then I'll show Salty how an express engine pulls trucks," Gordon huffed. "Careful, Captain," Salty tooted. "You don't want to get too big for your buffers." But Gordon ignored Salty. The next morning, Gordon raced along with his heavy load. "Now this is how you pull trucks," he puffed. But the signalman had accidentally left the point switched to the branch line. Gordon rattled through the junction. "That's strange," he exclaimed. "I'm on the branch line." "Oh no," the signalman cried. "Express trains aren't supposed to go that way." But it was too late. Gordon had already raced into the distance. The old branch line was weak and rusty. There were signs warning all the trains to go slow. But Gordon ignored the signs. "I'm an express engine, I don't go slow," he said, and he went even faster. The branch line couldn't take his weight, and the rails buckled. "Oh, help!" Gordon cried as he slid off the tracks and into a field. No one was hurt, but poor Gordon felt very undignified. "What will the Fat Controller say?" he groaned. He found out soon enough. "Well, Gordon," the Fat Controller said, "you wanted to show Salty a thing or two, and you've certainly done that. You've shown him how silly it is to ignore go-slow signs." "Sorry, sir," said Gordon, and he let out a sad wheesh of steam. Gordon was soon repaired and back at the docks ready for work, but he was very unhappy with himself. "Everyone makes mistakes," said Thomas, "even you." "Salty's sorry he teased you," puffed James. "And I'm sorry I was too big for my buffers," chuffed Gordon. And all the engines gave a jolly toot, even Gordon.
Toby and Henrietta were enjoying their new job on the island of Sodor, but they do look old-fashioned and did need new paint. James was very rude whenever he saw them. "Yuck! What dirty objects," he would say. At last, Toby lost patience. "James," he asked, "why are you red? I am a splendid engine, answered James, ready for anything. You never see my paint dirty. Oh, said Toby innocently. That's why you once needed bootlaces, to be ready, I suppose. James went redder than ever and snorted off. It was such an insult to be reminded of the time a bootlace had been used to mend a hole in his coaches. At the end of the line, James left his coaches and got ready for his next train. It was a slow freight, stopping at every station to pick up and set down cars. James hated slow freight trains. Dirty cars from dirty siding. Yeah! Starting with only a few, he picked up more and more cars at each station till he had a long train. At first, the freight cars behaved well, but James bumped them so crossly that they were determined to get back at him. Presently, they approached the top of Gordon's Hill. Heavy freight trains halt here to set their brakes. James had had an accident with cars before and should have remembered this. "Wait, James, wait," said the driver, but James wouldn't wait. He was too busy thinking what he would say to Toby when they next met. The freight car's chance had come. Hurrah, hurrah, they laughed, and banging their buffers, they pushed him down the hill. On, yelled the cars. "I've got to stop! I've got to stop!" groaned James. Disaster lay ahead. Something sticky splashed all over James. He had run into 2 tar wagons and was black from smokebox to cab. He was more dirty than hurt. But the tar wagons and some cars were all to pieces. Toby and Percy were sent to help and came as quickly as they could. "Look here, Percy," exclaimed Toby. "Whatever is that dirty object? That's James, didn't you know?" "It's James's shape," said Toby. "But James is a splendid red engine, and you never see his paint dirty." James pretended he hadn't heard. Toby and Percy cleared away the unhurt cars and helped James home. Sir Topham Hatt met them. "Well done, Percy and Toby." He turned to James. "Fancy letting your cars run away. I am surprised. You're not fit to be seen. You must be cleaned at once. Toby shall have a new coat of paint." "Please, sir, can Henrietta have one too?" said Toby. "Certainly, Toby." "Oh, thank you, sir. She will be pleased." All James could do was watch Toby as he ran off happily with the news. The engines were finding life difficult. Workmen were mending the viaduct on the main line. The arches needed strengthening. Sir Topham Hatt did not want to close the railway while the work was done, and so repairs took a long time. The engines had to take great care when crossing the viaduct, and the delay often made them late on their journey to the junction, where they knew Thomas would be ready to collect his passengers. Thomas grew crosser and crosser. "Time's time," he grumbled. "Why should I keep my passengers waiting while Henry and James dawdle about all day on viaducts?" "Don't blame me," snorted Henry. "If we hurried across the viaduct, it might collapse, and then you'd have no passengers at all. What would you do then?" "Run my train on time, for one thing," retorted Thomas. He hurried away before Henry could answer. Bertie was impatient too. He was timed to arrive just after Thomas. His passengers found that instead of going straight from the bus to their train, they were kept waiting till Thomas arrived. Soon Bertie grew cross with Thomas. "Late again," he remarked, as Thomas panted wearily in. "We may be friends, but I thought you could go fast, Thomas. It's time we had another race. I reckon I could beat you now." Thomas let off steam loudly. "Rubbish!" he hissed fiercely. "It's those main line engines. They dither about on the viaduct, and they blame Sir Topham Hatt's workmen. It's just an excuse for laziness, if you ask me." One day, James was later than ever at the junction. "I'm sorry, Thomas," he puffed. "I was held up at the station, and the viaduct made it worse." "It's lucky for you I'm a guaranteed connection," grumbled Thomas. Before James could answer, he puffed importantly away. Come along," he panted to the coaches. Annie and Clarabelle did their best, but Thomas soon found that he couldn't save much time. Suddenly, Thomas saw Bertie ahead. His radiator was steaming. "What's the matter?" asked Thomas. "You should be at the station by now. You're late." "I feel dreadful," moaned Bertie. "All upset inside, and driver says he can't make me better." "Thank goodness you're late, too. Can you take my passengers, please? They'll never get home otherwise." "Of course," agreed Thomas. He now felt sorry for Bertie and promised to get help at the next station. Thomas set off again. Already he felt much more cheerful, and Bertie's passengers, traveling in Annie and Clarabelle, all reached home safely. When Bertie was better, he came to thank Thomas. "I'm sorry I teased you about being late." "That's all right," replied Thomas. "I'm glad I could help. There are times when being late isn't such a bad thing after all." With a last cheerful greeting, the two friends went back to work. Duck is very proud of being Great Western. He talks endlessly about it, but he works hard too and makes everything go like clockwork. It was a splendid day. The cars and coaches behaved well. The passengers even stopped grumbling. But the engines didn't like having to bustle about. There are two ways of doing things, Duck told them. The Great Western Way or the wrong way. I'm Great Western and... Don't we know it, they groaned. The engines were glad when a visitor came. He purred smoothly towards them. Sir Topham Hatt introduced him. Here is Diesel. I have agreed to give him a trial. He needs to learn. Please teach him, Duck. Good morning, purred Diesel in an oily voice. Pleased to meet you, Duck. Is that James and Henry and Gordon, too? I am delighted to meet such famous engines. The silly engines were flattered. He has very good manners, they murmured. We're pleased to have him in our yard. Duck had his doubts. Come on, he said. Diesel purred after him. Your worthy Sir Topham Hatt to you, ordered Duck. Diesel looked hurt. Your worthy Sir Topham Hatt thinks I need to learn. He is mistaken. We Diesels don't need to learn. We know everything. We come to a yard and improve it. We are revolutionary. Oh, said Duck. If you're Rev-a-thingamy, perhaps you would collect my cars while I fetch Gordon's coaches. Diesel, delighted to show off, purred away. When Duck returned, Diesel was trying to take some cars from a siding. They were old and empty. They'd not been touched for a long time. Diesel found them hard to move. Pull! Push! Backwards, forwards! Oh! Oh! The cars groaned. We can't! We won't! Duck watched with interest. Diesel lost patience. He roared and gave a great heave. The cars jerked forward. Oh! They screamed. We can't! We won't! Some of their brakes snapped and the gear jammed in the sleepers. Chuckled Duck. Diesel recovered and tried to push the cars back, but they wouldn't move. Duck ran quietly round to collect the other cars. Thank you for arranging these, Diesel. I must go now. Don't you want this lot? No, thank you. Diesel gulped. And I've taken all this trouble? Why didn't you tell me? You never asked me. Besides, said Duck, you were having such fun being whatever it was you said. Goodbye. Diesel had to help the workmen clear the mess. He hated it. All the cars were laughing and singing at him. Cars are waiting in the yard, tackling them with easel. Show the world what I can do, gaily boasts the Diesel. In and out he creeps about like a big black weasel. When he pulls the wrong cars out, pop goes the Diesel. Growled Diesel and scuttled away to sulk in the shed. Diesel, the new engine, was sulking. The freight cars would not stop singing rudely at him. Duck was horrified. Shut up, he ordered, and bumped them hard. I'm sorry our cars were rude to you, Diesel. Diesel was still furious. It's all your fault. You made them laugh at me. Nonsense, said Henry. Duck would never do that. We engines have our differences, but we never talk about them to the cars. That would be disgraceful, said Gordon.
Disgusting.
Put in James. Despicable, finished Henry. Diesel hated Duck. He wanted him to be sent away, so he made a plan. He was going to tell lies about Duck. Next day, he spoke to the cars. I see you like jokes. You made a good joke about me yesterday. I laughed and laughed. Duck told me one about Gordon. I'll whisper it. Don't tell Gordon I told you.
And he sniggered away.
Ha, 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 guffawed the cars. Gordon will be cross with Duck when he knows. Let's tell him and get back at Duck for bumping us. They laughed rudely at the engines as they went by. Soon Gordon, Henry, and James found out why. Disgraceful, said Gordon.
Disgusting.
Put in James. Despicable, finished Henry. We cannot allow it. They consulted together. Yes, they said. He did it to us, we'll do it to him, and see how he likes it. Duck was tired out. The cars had been cheeky and troublesome. He wanted a rest in the shed. The three engines barred his way. Keep out. Stop fooling, said Duck. I'm tired. So are we, hissed the engines. We are tired of you. We like Diesel. We don't like you. You tell tales about us to the cars. I don't. You do. I don't. You do. Sir Topham Hatt came to stop the noise.
Duck called me a galloping sausage,
spluttered Gordon.
Rusty red scrap iron,
hissed James. I'm old Square Wheels, fumed Henry. Well, Duck? Duck considered. I only wish, sir, he said gravely, that I'd thought of those names myself, if the dome fits. He made cars laugh at us, accused the engines. Sir Topham Hatt recovered. He'd been trying not to laugh himself. Did you, Duck? Certainly not, sir. No steam engine would be as mean as that. Diesel lurked up. Now, Diesel, you heard what Duck said. I can't understand it, sir. To think that Duck, of all engines, I'm dreadfully grieved, sir, but know nothing. I see, said Sir Topham Hatt. Diesel squirmed and hoped he didn't. I'm sorry, Duck, but you must go to Edward's station for a while. I know he will be glad to see you. As you wish, sir. Duck trundled sadly away, while Diesel smirked with triumph. Duck, the Great Western engine, puffed sadly to Edward's station. It's not fair, he complained. Diesel has been telling lies about me and made Sir Topham Hatt and all the engines think I'm horrid. Edward smiled. I know you aren't, and so does Sir Topham Hatt. You wait and see. Why don't you help me with these cars? Duck felt happier with Edward and set to work at once. The cars were silly, heavy, and noisy. The two engines had to work hard, pushing and pulling all afternoon. At last, they reached the top of the hill. "Goodbye," whistled Duck, and rolled gently over the crossing to the other line. Duck loved coasting down the hill, running easily with the wind whistling past. Suddenly, it was a conductor's warning whistle. "Hurrah! Hurrah! Hurrah!" laughed the cars. "We've broken away! We've broken away! Chase him! Bump him! Throw him off the rails!" they yelled. "Hurry, Duck, hurry!" said the driver. They raced through Edward Station, but the cars were catching up. "As fast as we can, then they'll catch us gradually." The driver was gaining control. "Another clear mile and we'll do it." "Oh, glory! Look at that!" James was just pulling out on their line from the station ahead. Any minute, there could be a crash. "It's up to you now, Duck," cried the driver. Duck put every ounce of weight and steam against the cars. "It's too late!" Duck groaned. He veered into a siding where a barber had set up shop. He was shaving a customer. The silly cars had knocked their conductor off his van and left him far behind after he had whistled the warning. But the cars didn't care. They were feeling very pleased with themselves. "Beg pardon, sir," gasped Duck. "Excuse my intrusion."
No, I won't,
said the barber.
"You've frightened my customers. I'll teach you."
And he lathered Duck's face all over. Poor Duck. Thomas was helping to pull the cars away when Sir Topham had arrived.
"I do not like engines popping through my walls,"
fumed the barber.
"I appreciate your feelings," said Sir Topham Hatt, "but you must know that this engine and his crew have prevented a serious accident. It was a very close shave." "Oh," said the barber. Oh, excuse me."
He filled a basin of water to wash Duck's face.
"I'm sorry. I didn't know you were being a brave engine."
"That's all right, sir. I didn't know that either."
"You were very brave indeed," said Sir Topham Hatt. "I'm proud of you."
Sir Topham Hatt watched the rescue operation. Then he had more news for Duck.
"And when you are properly washed and mended, you are coming home."
"Home, sir? Do you mean the yard?"
"Of course."
"But, sir, they don't like me. They like Diesel."
"Not now. I never believed Diesel, so I sent him packing. The engines are sorry and want you back."
A few days later, when he came home, there was a really rousing welcome for Duck, the great Western engine. Gordon was resting in the siding. Sometimes he thought,
"It's really tiring to be such a large and splendid engine. One does have to keep up appearances so."
"Beep, beep, beep, beep. Hello, lazy bones," whistled Henry.
"What cheek!" spluttered Gordon. "That Henry is too big for his wheels. Fancy speaking to me like that. Me, who has never had an accident.
Aren't jammed whistles and burnt safety valves accidents? Asked Percy innocently.
No, indeed. High spirits. Might happen to any engine. But to come off the rails like Henry did, well, I ask you, is that right? Is it decent?
Then it was Henry's turn to take the express. Gordon watched him getting ready.
Be careful, Henry. You're not pulling the flying kipper now. Mind you, keep on the rails today.
Henry went off in a huff, and Gordon yawned and went to sleep. But not for long. Wake up, Gordon, said his driver. A special train's coming, and we're to pull it.
Is it coaches or freight cars?
Cars, said his driver.
Cars, said Gordon.
Gordon's fire was slow to start, so Edward had to push Gordon to the turntable to get him facing the right way.
I won't go! I won't go! Grumbled Gordon.
Don't be silly! Don't be silly! Puffed Edward. At last, Gordon was on the turntable. The movement had shaken his fire. It was now burning nicely and making steam. Gordon was cross and didn't care what he did. He waited till the table was halfway round.
I'll show them! I'll show them! He hissed.
He moved slowly forward to jam the table, but he couldn't stop himself and slithered into a ditch.
Whoosh! He hissed. Get me out! Get me out!
Not a hope, said his driver and fireman. You're stuck, you silly great engine. Don't you understand that? They telephoned Sir Topham Hatt.
So Gordon didn't want to take the special train and ran into a ditch? What's that you say? The special's waiting? Tell Edward to take it, please, and Gordon, leave him where he is. We'll get him out later.
On the other side of the ditch, some little boys were chattering. Oh, doesn't he look silly? They'll never get him out. They began to sing. Silly old Gordon fell in a ditch, fell in a ditch, fell in a ditch. Silly old Gordon fell in a ditch, all on a Monday morning. Gordon lay in the ditch all day.
Oh, dear, he thought. I shall never get out.
But that evening, they lifted Gordon and made a road of sleepers under his wheels to keep him from the mud. Strong ropes were fastened to his back end, and James and Henry, pulling hard, managed to bring him to safety. Late that night, Gordon crawled home, a sadder and wiser engine. One day, Thomas was at the junction when Gordon shuffled in with some freight cars.
Phew,
Remarked Thomas.
what a funny smell.
Can you smell a smell? I can't smell a smell, said Annie.
A funny, musty sort of smell,
said Thomas.
No one noticed it till you did,
Grunted Gordon.
It must be yours.
Not long ago, he had fallen into a dirty ditch. Thomas enjoyed teasing him about it. Annie, Clarabelle, do you know what I think it is? It's ditch water. Before Gordon could answer, Thomas puffed away. Annie and Clarabelle could hardly believe their ears. He's dreadfully rude. I feel quite ashamed. I feel quite ashamed. He's dreadfully rude. And to Thomas they said, "You mustn't be rude. You make us ashamed." But Thomas didn't care a bit. That was funny. That was funny, he chuckled. He felt very pleased with himself. Annie and Clarabelle were deeply shocked. They had great respect for Gordon, the big engine. Thomas left the coaches at the station and went off to a mine for some cars. Long ago, miners digging for lead had made tunnels under the ground. Their roofs are strong enough to hold up cars, but not the weight of engines. A large notice warns them not to enter the area. Danger! Engines must not pass this board. Silly old board, thought Thomas. He had often tried to pass it, but had never succeeded. But this morning he had made a plan. The fireman went to throw the switch. Now for my plan, thought Thomas. Bumping the cars fiercely, he jerked his driver off the footplate and followed them into the siding. "Come back!" yelled his driver. "Fire and smoke," said Thomas. "I'm sunk." And he was. "Oh, dear," he said, "I am a silly engine." "And a very naughty one, too. I saw you," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Please get me out. I won't do it again." "I'm not sure. We can't lift you out with a crane. The ground's not firm enough." Let me see. I wonder if Gordon could pull you out." "Yes, sir," said Thomas, but he didn't want to meet Gordon just yet. "Down a mine, is he?" laughed Gordon. "What a joke!" Boop, boop, little Thomas. We'll have you out in a couple of puffs. Strong cables were fastened between the two engines. "Are you ready? Heave!" It was a lot harder than they all thought. At last, Thomas was free. "I'm sorry I was cheeky," said Thomas. "That's all right, Thomas. You made me laugh," replied Gordon. "I'm in disgrace." "So am I," said Thomas. "Why, so you are, Thomas. Shall we form an alliance? You help me and I'll help you." "Right you are," agreed Thomas. "Good. That's settled," rumbled Gordon. And buffer to buffer, the Allies puffed home.
The little engines were busy clearing their railroad of leaves and broken branches. Peter, Sam, and Rusty often worked together. One day, Rusty helped Peter Sam to a water tower. Peter Sam felt much better after his long drink, but the freight cars were bored. "Let's break away." Their loads were heavy and the couplings old. One snapped. "Faster, faster!" shouted the freight cars. A sign read "Slow steep bends and ravine ahead," but the silly cars never saw it. Then, it was too late. Peter Sam arrived at the scene of the disaster, his driver sighed. This was our fault. We didn't secure them properly. We'll have to get help to pull them out. Sir Topham Hatt will be very annoyed. And he was. You will work in the yards until I can trust you again. Duncan was delighted with Peter Sam's dilemma. Fancy not securing your freight cars on a hill. They'll come back to spook you and your special funnel. Woo! And who's to say you're not afraid of ghosts? Snapped Rusty. Ghosts? Things that go bump in the night? Rubbish! Well, I'll tell you a story that will make your funnel quiver, Rusty said. A long time ago, a little engine was returning home. It was a misty, moonlit night. Suddenly, the engine lost control and plunged over the side into the swamps below. He was never found again. But many a workman will tell you that when the moon is full, they have seen the little engine trying to get home. But he never reaches the other side. So what do you think of that, Duncan? Rubbish, replied Duncan. Never mind him, Peter Sam. He'd be frightened if he really saw a ghost. This gave Peter Sam's driver an idea. Let's play a trick on Duncan. The next day, he spoke to Duncan's driver and fireman, who agreed. We'll do it tonight. Duncan had to take coal cars to the slate mines and then bring cars back. Duncan's driver decided as part of the plan to cross the old iron bridge. Haunted bridge. Rubbish, snorted Duncan. It's as tame as a pet rabbit. But all the same, he kept thinking about Rusty's story. When dusk fell, he was keen to leave. If we don't go now, Scarloey will take my favorite place in the sheds. We have to collect our cars first, his driver replied. He could see their plan was working because Duncan was nervous. When night fell, they set off. The mists were rising around the old iron bridge. Duncan whistled, and the sound echoed everywhere. Then, ahead, he saw flickering lights. His driver knew they were only insects that shine brightly at night, but to Duncan they looked like an engine. Next, his driver secretly threw a rock from the cab into the ravine below. It's the ghost! Take me back! Take me back, please! When Duncan reached the safety of his shed, he closed his eyes tightly. Spooked, are you, Duncan? Laughed his driver. No, I'm asleep. And Duncan refused to open his eyes. He did, though, when he thought his driver wasn't looking, just to make sure that he was still there. It was winter time on the island of Sodor. The snow covered fields and railway lines. All the engines were hard at work, except Percy. Come on, Percy. This is no time to have a rest. I'm stuck, moaned Percy, and my funnel's freezing up. Driver's gone for help. Ha! Huffed Thomas, and went on his way. Later, Thomas had to help clear snow by a tunnel, but it was too deep, and he got stuck. Thomas was very cross. Snow is nothing but trouble, he moaned. Rusty was close by. Driver says this winter is as bad as the worst winter of all. How worst? Asked Thomas. I'll tell you, replied Rusty, and then the little engine did. Skarloey was working the line to the slate mine in the mountains. When the snow came, it was difficult to work. They used the snow as a double buffer zone to help stop cars skidding through the ravine. One day, Skarloey set off to the mines with some empty cars. Meanwhile, there was trouble at the mine. The winch that hauls the cars up and down wasn't working properly. Skarloey had reached the ravine. High above him were the mine yards. "That snow looks dangerous," said his driver. "The sound of your engine and the freight cars could cause an avalanche. I'll set off an emergency cap and see what happens." Skarloey watched as his driver prepared it. Then they ran over the cap. The bang echoed around the gorge. Nothing happened. "Good," said his driver. "All's well. We'll have a cup of cocoa and then make our way." But high above them, all was not well. A long line of full cars was about to be winched down the slope. They had just started their journey when some empty cars became derailed. The winch groaned. "Break it! Snap it!" shouted the freight cars. And they did. On, faster, faster," they giggled. "The snowbank and buffers will stop them," said a workman. But he was wrong. The freight cars plunged into the ravine. Skarloey and his driver heard the noise and looked up. "Avalanche!" they cried. When the snow plume cleared, there was no sign of Skarloey. He was buried deep inside the high drift, blocking the ravine. And then came the funny part. "What's the funny part about an avalanche?" asked Thomas. "Well..." No one knew that the heat from Skarloey's engine had helped to make an igloo. "It's a snowball. It's a snow house. It's an engine." They cleared away the ice, only to find Skarloey's driver and fireman drinking cocoa as if nothing had happened. "Lucky for him, but it just goes to show you can't trust freight cars," said Thomas. "Or snow," said Rusty. The men had just cleared the snow away from him when Gordon puffed by with his machine. "Hey, look out! There's snow about!" He stopped by the tunnel and wheezed loudly. Then it happened. Oh no. "Help!" cried Gordon. "If Skarloey survived a snowfall, surely a big proud engine like you can do the same," chuckled Thomas. "Paw!" moaned Gordon from within, and then fell as silent as the snow.
It was Christmas on the island of Sodor. All the engines were working hard. Thomas and Toby were busy carrying people and parcels up and down the branch line. Everyone was happy. Only the coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, were complaining. "It's always the same before Christmas," they groaned. "We feel so full. We feel so full." "Oh, come on," said Thomas. "Where's your festive spirit? Christmas Day is almost here." By the side of the track was a little cottage with a familiar figure waving to them. "It's Mrs. Kindly," whistled Thomas. "Beep, beep! Happy Christmas!" Thomas always felt better for seeing her. Christmas just wouldn't be Christmas without Mrs. Kindly, he said to himself. When work was over, Thomas went to see the other engines. All their coats had been polished.
Huh, said Gordon. Just look at us. Your driver will have to work fast to get you as smart as us.
Never mind that, replied Thomas. I've something important to say. Do you realize it's been a whole year since Mrs. Kindly saved us from a nasty accident? You remember when she was ill in bed and... Yes, of course, interrupted Edward. You told us how she waved her red dressing gown out of her window to warn you about a landslide ahead. And you and Toby gave her presents? Percy joined in. And Sir Topham Hatt sent her to the seaside to get better. But, said the other engines, the rest of us never thanked her properly. Exactly, said Thomas. So now I think we should all give her a special Christmas party. Everyone was getting very excited, and the drivers felt sure that Sir Topham Hatt would agree, as indeed he did. The engines were all busy making plans when silence fell. Sir Topham Hatt had bad news.
The weather's changed badly. Mrs. Kindly is snowed up. Toby says he'll help to rescue her. You must help too, Thomas. There's no party unless you do.
Thomas hated snow, but he said bravely, I'll try, sir. We must rescue her. We must.
There's a good engine. You and Toby will manage splendidly.
Thomas charged the snowdrifts fiercely. Sometimes he swept them aside. Sometimes they stuck fast. And the men had to loosen them. But at the cutting near the cottage, they could go no further. Look at that, exclaimed Thomas's fireman. Beep, beep, here we are. An answering wave came from an upstairs window. Then they heard a familiar sound. That's Terence the Tractor, said Thomas. He's come to help too. Sure enough, Terence had a snowplow and was working hard to clear a patch to the railroad line and safety. At long last, the rescue was complete. Percy took the tired workmen home. Terence said goodbye to Mrs. Kindly and promised to take care of her cottage as he watched them all set off. The engines made good time. No more snow had fallen, but the yard was dark. There was no one to be seen. Thomas's heart sank. Suddenly, all the lights went on. What a marvelous sight awaited Mrs. Kindly.
Well done, said Sir Topham Hatt. I'm really proud of you all.
Mrs. Kindly especially thanked the smaller engines. Thomas and Toby are old friends, she said. And now, Percy, you are my friend too. Percy was very pleased. 3 cheers for Mrs. Kindly, he called. Beep, beep, beep. They all whistled. We wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas, we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thomas the Tank Engine and his friends thought it was the best Christmas ever, and Mrs. Kindly could think of nowhere she would rather live than here with them on the island of Sodor. It was 2 days before Christmas. Many children were expected on the island of Sodor. All the engines were busy with the final preparations. Sir Topham Hatt wanted this year's carol party to be an extra special celebration. Sir Topham Hatt was now waiting impatiently for Thomas.
Quickly now, he said. Our Christmas tree has arrived just in time. I want you to fetch it, Thomas. Duck can look after Annie and Clarabelle until you get back.
Will we be able to sing carols too? Asked Thomas.
We'll see,
promised Sir Topham Hatt. It would be nice to sing carols again, sighed Thomas as he set off on his important mission. Thomas collected the tree safely, but large snowdrifts lay ahead. I mustn't be late, he thought. Sir Topham Hatt is relying on me. Whistling bravely, Thomas tried to move, but he couldn't. There was worse to come. Thomas was snowed under. Meanwhile, the other engines waited and waited. They were grumbling about Thomas for being late. "Silence," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Thomas left the work safely, but snow has brought the telephone lines down. We must assume he is stranded." The engines now felt sorry for Thomas, and cold but confident, the twins set off to the rescue. Suddenly, they came to a drift that was deeper than the rest. "Help!"
"Hush," said Donald. "I can hear something." "Probably the wind," said Douglas.
"Help!"
"No, listen," insisted Donald.
"Over here!"
"Oh, it's Thomas. Come on, the poor wee engine must be frozen to the frames in there."
When the workmen arrived, it took some time to decide how to dig away the heavy drifts of snow. Thomas's driver and fireman, who had taken shelter at a nearby cottage, joined the rescue. At last, Thomas and the precious Christmas tree were freed from the snowdrift. Then they set off once more to finish their long journey. Sir Topham Hatt greeted them warmly.
"As a reward for all your hard work, you may go and enjoy the carols. Be quick now."
At the big station, all was soon ready.
1, 2, 3.
Suddenly, like magic, the station was flooded with lights.
Ladies and gentlemen and children, I give you 3 cheers for Thomas the Tank Engine and all his friends who have made this occasion possible.
Then there was a familiar whirring sound. Percy and Toby smiled. They knew who it was. With landing lights shining brightly, Harold the helicopter touched down gently in the snow. Bringing the greatest surprise of all, Santa Claus. Everyone cheered and the party began. "It's no fun getting stuck in the snow," whispered Thomas to Percy, "but it was worth it for this party. Happy holiday, Percy. Happy holiday, everyone." Autumn had come to the island of Sodor. The fields were changing from yellow stubble to brown earth, and a tractor was hard at work as Thomas puffed along. Later, Thomas saw the tractor close by. "Hello," said the tractor. "I'm Terence. I'm plowing." "I'm Thomas. I'm pulling a train. What ugly wheels you've got." "They're not ugly. They're caterpillars," said Terence. "I can go anywhere. I don't need rails." "I don't want to go anywhere," said Thomas. "I like my rails, thank you." Winter came with dark clouds full of snow.
I don't like it, said Thomas's driver. A heavy fall is coming. I hope it doesn't stop us. Phew, said Thomas. Soft stuff, nothing to it. And he puffed on, feeling cold but confident. They finished their journey safely, but by now the country was covered. You'll need your snowplow for the next journey, Thomas, said his driver. Puh! Snow is silly, soft stuff. It won't stop me. The snowplow was heavy and uncomfortable and made Thomas cross. He shook it and he banged it, and when they got back, it was so damaged that the driver had to take it off. You're a very naughty engine, he said to Thomas. Next morning, Thomas's driver and fireman came early and worked hard to mend the snowplow, but they couldn't make it fit. Thomas was pleased. I shan't have to wear it. I shan't have to wear it, he puffed to Annie and Clarabelle. But they were rather worried. I hope it's all right. I hope it's all right, they whispered to each other. The driver was worried too. It's not bad here, he said to the fireman, but it's sure to be deep in the valley. Silly, soft stuff, puffed Thomas. I didn't need that stupid old thing yesterday, and I shan't today. Snow can't stop me. He rushed into a tunnel thinking how clever he was, but there was trouble ahead. Cinders and ashes, said Thomas. I'm stuck. And he was. Back, Thomas, back, said his driver. Thomas tried, but his wheels spun and he couldn't move. The conductor went back for help, while everyone else tried to dig the snow away. But as fast as they dug, more snow slipped down until Thomas was nearly buried. Oh, my wheels and coupling rods! I shall have to stop here till I'm frozen. What a silly engine I am! And Thomas began to cry. At last, a bus came to rescue the passengers. And then, who should come to Thomas's rescue but Terence? Snow never worries him. He pulled the empty coaches away, then came back for Thomas. Thomas's wheels were clear, but still spun when he tried to move. Terence tugged and slipped and tugged, and at last dragged Thomas clear of the snow, ready for the journey home. Oh, thank you, Terence. Your caterpillars are splendid, said Thomas. I hope you'll be sensible now, Thomas, said his driver. I'll try, said Thomas, and he puffed slowly away. If someday you should see Thomas the tank engine puffing happily along the line, he may be on his way to a village nestled deep in the heart of the island of Sodor. One November morning, Thomas whistled to all his friends. It's nearly Thanksgiving, and I'll bring you lots of letters and parcels. But then an early snowstorm came. The island was covered with thick snow. The engines found work difficult.
Some had to help clear snow from the track, and workmen hacked away at the frozen banks of ice. Thomas and Percy were collecting important mail for Thanksgiving. "Driver says there's lots of mail for the village," said Thomas. "I'll need an extra car for it all." Percy was feeling left out. "It's not fair. You're not leaving any mail for me." But Percy's chance had come. "There's been a change of plan," said Thomas's driver. "Sir Topham Hatt needs us at the big station. Percy, you are to take Thomas's train to the village." Percy was delighted, but Thomas was sad. "I won't be able to say Happy Thanksgiving to all my friends." "Don't worry," said Percy kindly. "I'll do it for you." "It's not the same," sighed Thomas. Percy was making good time on his way to the village when suddenly, "What's that?" called his driver. There ahead was a fogman by the line. He was holding a red light. "The village is cut off by the snow," he shouted. "We need snowplows, workmen, and a helicopter. Leave your cars in the sidings and go back quickly." Percy was soon steaming to Harold's airfield. "Beep, beep," whistled Percy. "Wake up, lazy wings. The mountain villagers need your help. They're stranded." "Whiz-oh," replied Harold. "I like an emergency to keep me warm." And he buzzed away. "Now," sighed Percy, "what's next?" Suddenly, there was Thomas with Terence the Tractor and a works train. "Come on, Percy," whistled Thomas. "Follow me." The two engines battled their way through the snow. At last, they reached the village. Harold was already there, busily dropping food for Thanksgiving dinner to the people below. Terence quickly got to work. "Lovely stuff," he said as he pushed the snow aside. "Well done, Percy! Well done, Thomas!" cheered the villagers. "Percy, I've just remembered. Your mail train is still back at the siding, isn't it?" Percy hurried back to fetch it. Just then, Toby arrived with Henrietta. "We've brought lots of hot drinks and food for the villagers," he whistled. That night, all the engines had gone back to the sheds except Toby. The villagers had made a plan to thank the engines. They loaded paint pots and parcels into Henrietta, and then they set off through the moonlit countryside. All the engines were fast asleep in the sheds as Toby ran silently into the yard. He had no idea what the villagers were going to do, but he knew it was going to be a big surprise. When the engines woke the next morning, they could not believe their eyes. The sheds had been repainted and decorated. The engines whistled in delight, and everyone agreed that it was a really happy Thanksgiving.
It was winter on the island of Sodor. Peter Sam puffed nervously along the line. His funnel had never been the same since his accident with some cars. Now the biting wind was trying to blow it away. My funnel feels wobbly, he complained. I wish manager would hurry up with my new one. He says it will be something special. You and your special funnel, laughed the other engines. They were fond of Peter Sam, but his special funnel had become quite a joke. The winter wind grew worse. The rain came too, turning hillside streams into torrents, which threatened to wash the line away. Rusty, the little diesel, worked hard carrying workmen up and down the line. They were removing branches and leaves so water could flow away. But one morning, Rusty's driver brought bad news. There's been a washout near the tunnel. The track bed has been swept away. We must repair the damage immediately. The important work took longer than expected. As days went by, the weather changed. It became frosty and much colder. The workmen finished at last. Peter Sam was most careful as he took the morning train over the mended piece of track. Soon he approached the tunnel. It was short and curved, so his driver could not see right through it. Peter Sam was heading for trouble. There's something hanging from the roof, shouted his driver. Peter Sam came out of the tunnel a different-looking engine. He no longer had his funnel. Here's what hit you, Peter Sam, called the conductor, and he produced a thick, cold icicle. They set off again, but without his funnel, the journey was very difficult. Then his fireman saw an old drain pipe lying beside the track. We'll use that instead of your funnel. At least it'll help control the smoke. Peter Sam finished his journey with the drain pipe wired to his boiler. The other engines laughed, and Sir Handel sang a song about it. Peter Sam said again and again, his new funnel will put ours to shame. Went into the tunnel and lost his old funnel. Now his famous new funnel's a drain. The teasing continued until at last the day came when his new funnel arrived. Sir Topham Hatt proudly presented it. Oh dear, someone squashed it, said Peter Sam, but Sir Topham Hatt laughed. Don't worry, Peter Sam. This funnel is something special indeed. You'll soon see. Peter Sam's new funnel had special pipes which made puffing much easier. I feel stronger than ever before, he hummed. Even Sir Handel was impressed. I can't understand it. Peter Sam just seems to stroll along the line. He makes work look so easy. The engines don't laugh at Peter Sam's funnel now. They wish they had one like it.
It's winter holiday time on the island of Sodor. It's very cold, but the engines don't mind. They love this time of year when the stations look jolly in their decorations. There is plenty of work with passengers and parcels to be delivered, no matter what the weather. Driver says there's more snow on the way, said Edward. We'll soon be wearing our snow plows, said James. You'll enjoy that, won't you, Thomas? Teased Henry. You know I won't, said Thomas. I don't like my snow plow. Sure enough, that night the wind blew and the snow fell heavily. The next morning, Sir Topham Hatt arrived. He told the engines they were to have snow plows fitted. And you are to collect a special from Callan Station. It's needed for the village feast on Toby's branch line. Thomas was excited about his special, but not about his snowplow. Please, sir, my plow is awkward and uncomfortable. Do I have to wear it? Everyone has to wear a snowplow, said Sir Topham Hatt. The fitters, his driver, and firemen all helped with Thomas's snowplow. We'll have to try that again, laughed his driver. Big, horrid, awkward thing, Thomas grumbled. He was much happier when he arrived at Callan Station and saw his special. It was a beautiful Christmas tree. The tree will have lights and stand in the middle of the village, said Edward. Make sure you get it to Toby safely. I will, said Thomas. Thomas arrived at Maithwaite, and Toby was very happy to see him. The villagers will be delighted with this tree, Toby said. I'm glad you have your snowplow. I can't clear the snowdrifts by myself. Thomas couldn't see. There was a huge rock buried under the snow. Suddenly, his snowplow hit the rock. Bouncing buffers, exclaimed Thomas. My plow is broken. His driver tried to stop, but the broken plow hit the water tower. Cinders and ashes, exclaimed Thomas. We can't go any further, said Thomas's driver, and there's no one to help us. But the villagers need their tree, said Thomas. Let me try again. I'm sure I can make it. It wasn't easy without a snowplow, but Thomas was determined. He pushed, and he pushed, and he pushed. Thomas was trying as hard as he could, but there was just one snowdrift after another. Finally, Thomas and Toby were pulling into the village station. Thomas whistled and the villagers cheered when they saw their beautiful tree. Hooray, they said, hooray! The next day, Sir Topham Hatt sent for Thomas. Thomas was worried. What would Sir Topham Hatt say about his broken snowplow? But Sir Topham Hatt wasn't cross. He was very pleased. The villagers had a wonderful feast, he said. You were very brave to take on that snow without a plow. Thank you, sir, said Thomas. As you know, continued Sir Topham Hatt, there are no spare snowplows, so you'll just have to do without yours for a while. Oh, thank you, sir, grinned Thomas. It was an icy day on the island of Sodor. The engines were working very hard. They didn't mind the cold because they had toasting hot fireboxes to keep them warm. That evening, Sir Topham Hatt came to the sheds. There's a big freeze coming tonight, he said. James and Percy are to deliver extra coal to the stations. Yes, sir, they said eagerly, and Sir Topham Hatt drove away. You'd better hurry, teased Thomas, or scary Jack Frost might get you. Who's Jack Frost? Percy whistled nervously. Don't be so silly, sniffed James. Jack Frost is not scary. Yes, he is, teased Thomas. He's all white with a big spiky face. Rubbish, said James. James knew Jack Frost wasn't scary, but poor Percy wasn't so sure. Percy shivered. Jack Frost is not scary. Jack Frost is not scary. Jack Frost is not scary. Meanwhile, James puffed along his route. Silly Percy, he thought, all steamed up over Jack Frost. Percy made his last delivery. The station master was very pleased to see him. "Oh, Percy," he cried, "we need twice as much coal to last through this freeze." "Don't worry," Percy said. "This is my last stop. You can have mine." So Percy's driver parked him in a siding with only a lantern for company. "Do you think scary Jack Frost will find me?" said Percy. "Jack Frost's not scary," chuckled his driver. "And don't worry, Elizabeth will bring you some more coal in the morning." And then his driver and fireman went home to bed. Late at night, the icy wind howled. It started to snow. Soon Percy's face was so cold, an icicle hung from his nose. "Oh, bother," Percy stuttered, but it didn't sound like Percy. It was so cold he could hardly make a sound. At last, James was on his way back to the sheds. In the fog, he saw shadows and strange and scary shapes. "Scary Jack Frost," he whispered nervously. "Bah!" "Hello, James?" muttered Percy icily. "Scary Jack Frost," cried James, and he raced away as fast as his wheels could carry him. He didn't stop until he got back to the sheds. The next morning, Elizabeth brought plenty of coal. "Oh, my dear," Elizabeth chuffed to Percy, "it looks like Jack Frost really got you." The firelighter started Percy's fire. Soon his ice mask melted away. So scary Jack Frost is only frost, tooted Percy happily, and soon he was as warm as toast. When Percy arrived at the sheds, James was bragging to the other engines. "I saw scary Jack Frost last night," James huffed. "He even knows my name." "He also knows that you ran away," teased Percy. And all the engines whistled, including James. But Percy's was the loudest whistle of all. Winter on the island of Sodor can be windy and cold. When the cold wind blows, the engines can't wait to get back to the snug warmth of Tidmouth sheds. "Bitter cold, bitter cold, bitter cold," chuffed Toby. "Still, I'll soon be back in my nice dry shed." But suddenly, Toby's driver applied the brakes. He could see a farmer standing knee-deep in snow. He was waving a red flag. "My phone lines are down, all the roads are blocked, and my sheep have just started lambing," the farmer said. "They're trapped on the hillsides, cut off by the snow." "What can we do to help?" Toby chuffed. "I need a vet as quickly as possible." "We'll stop at the next signal box," said Toby's driver. "I'll phone the vet from there." Toby raced to the signal box, and the driver phoned ahead to the station. Sir Topham Hatt and the vet were waiting for Toby as he arrived. The farmer's lambs are stranded on the hillside, cried Toby. We've got to rescue them. So we shall, said Sir Topham Hatt. I'll send Duck right away. This is a job for an engine with a snowplow. Toby knew Duck was the right engine for the job. He was very powerful. Hurry, Toby called anxiously as Duck chuffed out of the station. But so much snow had fallen, the tracks ahead were blocked. We can't go on, said Duck's driver grimly. We'll have to go back. Toby was surprised to see Duck return to the station. I tried my hardest, puffed Duck, but the weather's getting worse. Even Duck's snowplow can't get through, said his driver. Then Toby had an idea. My old branch line runs out there, sir. Remember? It's far too dangerous, said Sir Topham Hatt. It would never carry Duck's weight. It might take my weight, said Toby. And I know that line like the back of my buffers, he added. It's our only chance to help the lambs. Sir Topham Hatt agreed, but he told Toby to be very careful. Soon, a blizzard was howling. Toby's driver was worried. I can do it, called Toby, as long as these rails hold. But Toby had forgotten about the rickety old bridge. Help! My wheels are wobbling, he cried. His driver fought for control as Toby struggled on. I've got to reach the other side of this bridge, gasped Toby. Those lambs need me. The farmer was waiting. It was very cold. Suddenly, a ghostly glowing eye shone through the snowstorm. It was Toby's headlamp. You made it, cried the farmer. What a brave engine you are. The vet and the farmer went to find the lambs. But they soon returned. The lambs are safe and sound, Toby, said the vet. But we need a place now to keep the little ones warm. Toby smiled. I think you'll find Henrietta has plenty of room. Toby stayed for several days, just to make sure the lambs were all right. The farmer was very grateful. Thank you, Toby, he said. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you, said Toby. There's nothing I like better than helping out a friend in need.
Controller's engines are proud of how useful they are. It makes them feel important. But none of them feels more important than Gordon. Watch out, Gordon wished. You'll get my paint all sooty. Pulling trucks is a sooty job, teased Salty, but then you wouldn't know. Of course not, Gordon huffed importantly. Express engines don't pull trucks. It wouldn't be dignified. Dingy-fried, puzzled Percy. What's that? Dignified, Gordon corrected. It means someone's too big for his buffers, teased Salty. Pah, said Gordon, and he puffed away. That evening, fog covered the island of Sodor. Everything slowed down, and soon the docks were packed with waiting trucks. This caused confusion and delay. The fat controller came to the sheds. He was in a great hurry. "Henry, Thomas and Percy," he said, "you must go to the docks immediately." "Yes, sir," they whistled. Then The Fat Controller turned to the big blue engine. "You too, Gordon," he said. "I need a big engine to take the trucks where they won't be in the way." "Trucks!" huffed Gordon. He could not believe what he had heard. Gordon wasn't happy to be pulling trucks. He waited impatiently while they were shunted into place. Hurry up, chuffed Gordon crossly. "Why the rush, Gordon?" asked Thomas. "If I must pull trucks, then I'll show Salty how an express engine pulls trucks," Gordon huffed. "Careful, Captain," Salty tooted. "You don't want to get too big for your buffers." But Gordon ignored Salty. The next morning, Gordon raced along with his heavy load. "Now this is how you pull trucks," he puffed. But the signalman had accidentally left the point switched to the branch line. Gordon rattled through the junction. "That's strange," he exclaimed. "I'm on the branch line." "Oh no," the signalman cried. "Express trains aren't supposed to go that way." But it was too late. Gordon had already raced into the distance. The old branch line was weak and rusty. There were signs warning all the trains to go slow. But Gordon ignored the signs. "I'm an express engine, I don't go slow," he said, and he went even faster. The branch line couldn't take his weight, and the rails buckled. "Oh, help!" Gordon cried as he slid off the tracks and into a field. No one was hurt, but poor Gordon felt very undignified. "What will the Fat Controller say?" he groaned. He found out soon enough. "Well, Gordon," the Fat Controller said, "you wanted to show Salty a thing or two, and you've certainly done that. You've shown him how silly it is to ignore go-slow signs." "Sorry, sir," said Gordon, and he let out a sad wheesh of steam. Gordon was soon repaired and back at the docks ready for work, but he was very unhappy with himself. "Everyone makes mistakes," said Thomas, "even you." "Salty's sorry he teased you," puffed James. "And I'm sorry I was too big for my buffers," chuffed Gordon. And all the engines gave a jolly toot, even Gordon.